Welcome, everybody. So this is a USJC event called Finding Mindful Solace During a Torrid COVID Storm. And I just wanted to give a little bit of background to this special event. This event really came about through some conversations that I was having as a USJC Northern California co-chair with Jackie, that, there were a few things that happened during 2020 with COVID-19. And one of them was, of course, this new paradigm that we've all now learned to embrace, which is the video forum. And in many ways, it's made things difficult, right? Because I think as human beings, we need to connect with each other. We need to be able to be present with each other. And digital alone is sometimes a little bit, a shortcoming. But the flip side of that is that this Zoom environment has made it much easier for us to connect with people that we otherwise wouldn't have, right? So people from overseas, people from different neighborhoods, people that would have not otherwise have had the means to travel because they're juggling two jobs or they just aren't able to afford it, et cetera. So I think that this digital platform is something that has really opened up that possibility. So we thought, okay, great. I think what we can do is, instead of thinking about an event regionally or per an age group, per something else, what we can do is we can actually collaborate across different regions. So this is the first USJC event that's been done blended with some collaboration across regions. So we did this in collaboration with Hawaii, with Northern California, with Southern California, and with New York. And by the way, this will be the first of what we hope to be many. So we're excited to work with other regions across the United States and around the world. So, and then the second part is that we thought, okay, there's the inevitability of living is that we all get older. And so we were thinking, okay, there's an O40 group, of which I'm one of the members, over 40. And then you have a U40 group, which is under 40, and ELP. And as we're all getting older, some of those folks that were in one age group are now sort of not in that age group anymore, but, trying to figure out how that transition happens. So we were like, okay, this makes a lot of sense for us to put together an event that's collaborating across regions and also across different age groups. And as we thought about that mechanism, we also thought, okay, what topic could we talk about that's going to be universal in that way? And so the second thing that happened with COVID-19, aside from this new paradigm of how we connect and communicate and find ways of a common language, is unfortunately increased stress, right? Mental and emotional health, and some physical health, right? We all become much more sedentary, and so this whole health piece is something that I think everybody can relate to, whether it's personally or whether it's somebody in your family. And hopefully you all have been staying safe, and that your family has been staying safe. What really made this really pronounced as the U.S.-Japan Council is that in October, Japan had one of its highest rates of suicide. There were more people that died from suicide in October than in the whole year from COVID-19. And so as we started to really think about this, we realized that this whole area around mental health and stress wasn't just about mental well-being in and of itself, right? So we always know about the stresses. We all endure stress, but starting to realize that this has repercussions and impacts beyond just our health. It's really about how you can perform as a leader, how you can perform as somebody that needs to be present to a group of people, whether that's at your church, in your community, in your business, in your office, wherever it is. And so we realized that this was an opportunity for us to address a topic that might not have otherwise been par for the course when it comes to USJC topics. And given that it's something that we can all experience and understand, we thought, okay, great, let's focus on this notion of mindful solace, right, of finding the quiet in the storm. And we thought it would be really interesting to be able to bring together a couple of different viewpoints. In fact, what we have today is going to be sort of not opposite ends of the spectrum, but definitely on different spectrums of thinking about this notion of whole health and mental and emotional wellness and well-being. And so that started to create a space for us on the kinds of speakers that we would want to bring into the conversation. And another first for USJC that came out of this was thinking, okay, we're going to have these two extraordinary speakers who you will hear from today. And in addition to that, what we're going to do is we're going to have representatives from these different groups come together and to be the ones that kind of sit and ask, question, and engage our two speakers in a dialogue. So that's the background of how we came into this conversation today, what we hope you glean out of it and are inspired by. And the two speakers that we have today is Cristina Moon, who's a strategist, writer, and Zen teacher at Daihon Chozenji, Dimzai Zen Temple and Monastery in Honolulu. She anchors Chozenji's rigorous body-based approach to Zen and trains in Kendo, Chado, and ceramics. In a professional life, Cristina has launched programs in digital marketing communications and has led advocacy campaigns across a variety of political and social movements. Cristina is also a graduate at the University of Chicago, Stanford Graduate School of Business, and publishes an email newsletter called The Moon Millennial Monk. And then we also have Dr. Sean Sullivan. So Reverend Cristina Moon, Dr. Sean Sullivan, who is a licensed clinical psychologist and CEO of One Perfect, where he leads a fiercely caring design, technology, and psychology team spread around the world, sharing a common goal: transform every smartphone into a pathway to health and well-being. Dr. Sullivan began his formal psychology education at Harvard and finished with a digital health psychology focused postdoc based at University of California, San Francisco. And so what we have here is somebody that inhabits the world of Zen and sort of the historically ancient way of mental and whole well-being. And then we also have somebody that is from the more digital era of embracing technology into that world. And so the conversation that we'll have today will be moderated with your fellow USJC members. For those of you who are USJC, welcome. So we have Jackie, my colleague, co-chair for Northern California. She'll be closing out the event. So she's here with us. And we also have Peter Shimamoto, who is representing SoCal, Southern California, who's a partner at Wilkin. And by the way, he's a lawyer who's also on the board of East West Players, which I found very impressive. And we also have Eric Keenan, representing Hawaii. He's the president and founder of Alakai Executive Search. And we have Mark Ieki, representing New York, senior consultant at Global Market Advisory Group. And then last but certainly not least, we have Kyla Kitamura. She represents U4O and ELP, Senior Manager of Government and Public Affairs at Japan Automobile Manufacturers Association. So this is the rich group that we'll have today, engaging with Sean and Cristina in a fireside chat. And we'll be running for about an hour. Suzanne will be joining us at the end, the president of the U.S.-Japan Council, just to give a few words to really underscore the importance of this topic for our community. And then we'll go out into breakout rooms so that I'm sure there'll be plenty of things that many of you will want to reflect on and talk about, especially after what you hear, what Reverend Moon and Dr. Sullivan have to share with us today. So without much further ado, if I can hand it over to our panel of USJC members to kick it off with the first question. And I think that was with you, Eric. Don't have a list in front of me. Question number 1.
I'm on question 3, actually.
Yeah, it's Mark.
Okay, go ahead.
Rika.
Yeah. Mark? Mark, are you on mute? I think you're on mute.
Thanks, Rika.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And hi, Sean. Hi, Cristina. So I get the first question. In what ways have you seen COVID-19 increase cases, situations of mental or emotional disturbances or imbalances in your own personal lives or in the work that you do? Thank you.
Would you like to go ahead, Cristina, or would you like me to take that one?
Sean, why don't you go first?
Okay, okay. Um, well, so let me first of all say thank you so much for having us be here, me be here. This is to me a really exciting. It's one of those things on my calendar that I was looking forward to, and I kept noticing, because the opportunity to talk to people who are interested in the intersection of culture and in technology and in meditation. I mean, these are the things for me that I've spent my entire professional life focused on. So it's really an honor to be here with you, and a pleasure. A lot of my personal life too, and meditation is a very personal thing you find when you begin a practice and start to dive into it. So again, thank you for having us here. And I'm hoping, I know one of the intentions of bringing people together that Rika has mentioned is that we have an opportunity to connect authentically and to feel connected in a way that, with COVID has been difficult. So, and it turns out we're starting on a bit of a tough note here with the difficulties emotionally that we've seen in my work and that I've seen in my life personally. So Rika mentioned the Japan suicide rate has spiked in the United States. We don't have a great system, so it's a little delayed before we know the numbers there, but we do know a number of things. And I did a little bit of homework on that just to frame what we're looking at here. So we know that 40% of Americans right now are grappling with at least one mental health or drug related problem. And that means that in addition, 75% of young people, which is 26 and under in this survey, are struggling with emotional problems. In addition to that, 25% of those young people have acknowledged that they've considered suicide in the last 30 days. So there are massive problems out there, and suicidal thoughts are often preceded by or correlate with increased anxiety and depression and the unemployment out there and the homelessness. So there's clearly massive emotional issues that we're struggling with. In addition to the health issues that are the sort of in the forefront and the most obvious. And what we see and what I've seen is that elevated stress is the theme that runs across all of these issues. You see families in close quarters, which is difficult. The children's lives have changed, political upheaval, which is obvious to everyone, and the economic misery and isolation. So this is difficult on relationships. And for most people, it means, Rika touched on this, socializing has become different. And this is a major stress. This is a significant issue for so many people. A lot of people's lives are centered in connecting and being with other people. For me, this was the first Christmas that I didn't spend with my brothers and sisters and mom and dad. So that was a significant change for me. But you know, on this question, what I think would be useful to appreciate together is that this increased stress is manifest for people in different ways. And I put it into three buckets. There are probably more. You might notice that you fall outside these buckets, but to me, beyond the physiological changes, you see that the stress produces in a psychological sense. It increases the speed of your thoughts a lot of times, which will result in anxiety and anger. For other people, it produces rumination. So you're repetitively processing the same information, and that's another form of stress. And for other people, it will be a reduction in energy so that your thoughts actually slow down and you feel less clear and you fall into depressive feelings, maybe even a depression. In all of these correlates to stress tend to be associated with a pulling away from a sense of hope, a pulling away from a connection to your own life. So in your meaning and in the things that drive you. So hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about how to do a little bit of reconnection intentionally. But in terms of emotional difficulties, those are the things that I've seen manifest increasingly.
Yeah, I can echo what Sean is describing. So I think it's worth stepping back for a second. As Rika mentioned in her introduction for me, I wear two hats. So I'm a Zen priest here at Chozenji in Honolulu, but for the past 20 years or so, I've also been working in the social change arena. So from the, in terms of the manifestations or what I've seen that Sean's talking about personally coming, through the gates at Chosen G, we've definitely seen people who are experiencing this on sort of a continuum, a COVID continuum, if you will, from people who are frontline healthcare workers or who've lost family members to COVID, all the way to people who are just feeling an increased baseline of stress because of the virus, knowing that it's out there. So we've definitely seen walking through the gates, but also because we have a global network of people who've lived here and trained here at one time and who may be distributed in different places, we've certainly encountered that impact of COVID, and it can be very stark and very difficult in the moment. And then from my social change perspective, and I think this speaks a little to that other end of the spectrum of how people have been experiencing the stress and mental imbalance of the pandemic, of that baseline sort of increased stress level. In my social change work, I've definitely noticed more people waking up in a way to conditions in our society that pre-existed COVID, but that were really exacerbated and laid bare by the pandemic. So I'm talking about systemic racism, gender inequality, economic inequality. I saw the same statistics that Rika was talking about with the increased suicide rate in Japan. And it's worth noting that the increase in suicides among women under 40 in Japan specifically was 2 times the overall increase in suicide rate. So if the overall increase was about 18% in a course of a couple months in 2020, that rate among women under 40 was 37, 38%. And that was because women were in economic sectors where they were harder hit by the pandemic. They were the first to get laid off or have job cuts, have hours cut. And then on top of that, issues like increasing rates of domestic violence and pressures at home because kids are at home out of school and things like that. So the pandemic in a lot of ways has laid these conditions bare. In the United States, it's that Black and Brown communities are disproportionately shouldering the burden and experiencing increased infection and mortality rates because of the pandemic than the rest of society. So in many ways, we're feeling this increased sense of heartbreak and a collective trauma, really, that I think impacts us in a lot of different ways. And I'm sure we'll have a chance to address this a little bit more later. But from the perspective of someone who, teaches people and engages in pretty intense, rigorous Zen training, we're finding a lot more people coming to us actually because of COVID and saying, I'm realizing whether it's because of these larger systemic issues, social issues, or because of my own personal experience because of the pandemic, the challenges that I'm facing are so much higher now than they used to be. And I wasn't prepared to meet them. I think I need to start doing things in my life, training myself, preparing myself in a way that actually will rise to that level as well.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Sean and Cristina. I think, I was having a conversation with somebody the other day about the inequalities and equities that the COVID-19 has surfaced. And we were talking about just even access to healthcare, right? And people tend to think of healthcare as access to medicines for the body. And we were talking about, access to mental health care. And we talked about how COVID-19 there is a virus before the virus of COVID-19, and that virus is sort of embedded, racism that makes access to healthcare, mental health care, that much more difficult for certain groups. So, yeah, I think that's something very, very profound, Cristina. So thank you for underscoring that. So as we get to the next question, we'll get to expand on some of the things you've mentioned. So Peter, we could shine the light on you to ask the next question to our speakers.
Sure. So thanks again, Sean and Cristina, for doing this. This is very valuable. So my question is, what do you think the role of technology is in addressing these types of issues? And I know, Sean, your bio says that you have a lot of experience in digital mental therapeutics. I was just curious as to what exactly that is. So maybe we can start with you on that subject.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so this to me is more of the fun part. This is the opportunities and solutions. And yes, it's true. I've spent my professional life focused on right from my graduate school research for the last 20 years, everything that I've done professionally is focused on the application of technology to psychology. And now we do that now at One Perfect with our apps that support learning meditation and will teach people in order to enable them to shift from whatever state of mind they're in right now into the state of mind that they want to be in. That's our goal, and we're having a lot of success according to the feedback. But to address the question more specifically, when I think about digital health, I think about it as three legs of a stool, right? And the first leg is traditional technology, the technology we all think about when we hear technology, bits and bots. So it's software and it's hardware, it's the code. And you could also throw into that bucket the design, like user interface design. All of these have improved so much over the last decades since I began working in technology for psychology. So that's the first kind of technology, the first leg of the stool of technology for digital health. And the second leg to me would be the learning process. So that could be a yoga is a learning process, or meditation is a learning process, or a new language is a learning process. Really, I think of it as any organized information that you can apply to produce predictable results in your life. So that's the second leg of the stool. And the third leg is the greatest, most complex, impressive technology of them all. And that is the human being, the human body, really. This is trillions of cells interacting in billions of ways every single second of your life to produce your experience of life, your ability to navigate in time and space. And this to me is the miracle. So that's why technological innovation is exciting to me. We've seen for decades, years and decades now, the advance in our ability to use technology, the first one, the bits and the bots, to teach the technology of learning processes, right? The meditation and the yoga, to enable accelerated development of you, the technology of you. So learning can be now more personalized. It could be more, it's on your own schedule. It's 24/7. And that makes for a massive opportunity to teach and to learn. To me, the first thing is the basic psychology skills, so that we're all armed with the ability to recognize that stress that comes in and then have strategies to cope with it. And cope with the inevitable pain and loss. Right now, it's amplified with COVID, but life is characterized by stress and pain and loss and difficulty. So that's how I think about it.
And how about you, Cristina? How do you view technology in your practice?
Yeah, Sean hit the nail on the head with his three definitions of technology, or the three different modes we can think about it in. I feel like just, reflecting on sort of who's tuning in for this call, I guess I'm thinking about my answer to this question in terms of, I think people are tuning in because they want to know, okay, what can I do? And so what technology is available? I certainly hope that Sean's app is one of them. And I know that there are other app-based technologies that can be really helpful for people to get a better sense of either, tracking through data analysis and sensing, sort of just like what's going on in their own body, whether it's through journaling and taking notes and being able to reflect, or if it's on, guided meditation practice, or maybe it's even using your phone to track your resting heart rate and your heart rate variability over time. All of those things are very helpful. The way that I would approach it, and that Zen really approaches this question of what's the technology that's most worth investigating and investing in, it is what Sean talked about. It is the human body. It's this right here. And it's not, and to be entirely honest with you, it's the hardest thing that you can do. It's much more difficult than having a reminder on your phone to journal every day, or to even just watch your breath, or to give you positive inspiration. Doing the work of really changing the hardware of the human body as the most impressive piece of known technology in the world, it can be pretty challenging stuff, and stuff that maybe people, would rather not spend the time on. But there's a fundamental shift that needs to happen. Again, the COVID pandemic presents, in some ways, not to gloss over the suffering that's been experienced, but it does present an opportunity to reevaluate and to say, okay, I have my life as it has existed up until this point. And now I have all of these stressors that are so much bigger and bigger than anything I could have imagined, impinging on me and my ability to be the person that I want to be. Is the answer to work around sort of the edges, to maintain the same level of comfort in my day-to-day that I had before the pandemic? Or is it to say, I want to fundamentally change the person that I am, how I move in the world, in order to be able to meet the next challenge, if there's another pandemic, or maybe it's the climate crisis? So there's there's like sort of a question of first principles of what our goals are with approaching technology and approaching well-being in general. Is it wanting to feel good temporarily in the moment? Or is it wanting to build a foundation, really change how this hardware works, so that no matter the circumstance that presents itself, you can still feel your feet on the ground, you can see 180 degrees in every direction, you can keep your breath, you can keep your heart rate nice and slow. I think that's fundamentally how I would approach the question of what's the role of technology. It's up to you, but you have to decide how to approach it, how you want to approach it first.
That's terrific. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's very, very, very profound. We just take this piece of technology so for granted, not realizing how it's a foundation to everything. Yeah, I'm working on running. So what I'm working on is getting back to running right now, getting that hardware, getting the stiffness out of the hardware. Okay, so let's move to question 3. Eric, if you will, please.
Sure. Aloha, Cristina and Sean. Good to see you again. A bit of overlap to the last one, but what about the role of innovation or balancing routine with something new in managing stress and mental health?
Should we? Oh, go ahead, Sean.
Okay. So I happen to grapple with this question a whole lot because in a sort of former iteration of technology for psychology, I was creating virtual reality tools for psychology to be applied in psychology. And there's such, when you get into virtual reality, if you've done it before, you know that it's an incredibly engaging experience the first time and the second time. But what you see is that no matter how engaging something is, that we humans habituate to the same experience if we have it over and over. So we have variety on that. We're variable. Some of us take 2 times before we're bored with it, and some of us might go 10 or 100. And so I learned through that when I'm working with the technology to see if it's going to be useful for psychology, the most important piece of this is to recognize that everybody has a unique relationship to routine and a unique experience of stress, right? A unique appetite for repetition. And for that reason, when it comes to this kind of question, like balancing routine with innovation, I think the place to start is to understand what drives you personally, to get really intimately and personally in touch with what inspires you. After that, you can focus on routine and how to apply technology or innovation to connect you to what inspires you. So to me, it's as basic as developing a statement of purpose, of meaning. That's the starting place, because once you can articulate that for yourself, now you have a powerful meaning story that's going to drive you to move forward in your life, and you can return to that anytime as a way of centering yourself into the present moment. For everyone that's going to be different, and that's why, to me, that's the starting place. It might be for you, your family, or personal growth. It might be your dedication to art, or to meditation, or to self-improvement, or to God. So that's where I would start, because ultimately where stress comes from, I talked about this a little bit earlier, it's a consequence of pulling away from your connection to meaning. So the more you can get clear on how you connect to meaning, what your personal meaning is, the easier it's going to be to remain connected in those moments when stress inevitably increases in your life. And there's some practical ways you can do that, but why don't I stop there for the moment?
Yeah, I would, from a Zen perspective, say we flip that a little bit around, which is to say that I think we can get to the same point from multiple different approaches. So Zen starts with the body first, rather than the concept, the conceptual understanding first, the experience. So that's why, for example, when I teach Zazen or seated meditation, I focus on posture, breath, concentration, things that you do with your body first that you can experience. What I really love and what's most magical for me and most transformative and efficient and effective in the particular kind of training here at Chozenji is that we do this very old-fashioned Japanese thing of incorporating all of the martial and fine arts as well. And that's because Chozenji, one of the Chozenji founders, Omori Sogen, he really believed that the greatest contribution that Japan had made to human civilization was taking the arts, martial arts, fine arts, but really taking anything that you can do and turning them into do, or ways to realize your true self. So I would say that the opposite approach, the alternative approach to setting the intention and meaning first, would be to look at the things that you already do in your life and to pay attention when you're doing them really fully, to be in your body as you do them. And if Marie Kondo can take tidying and make it a way to realize her true self, then I think we can all find anything that we do in our day-to-day lives and find ways to really be present, feel our feet on the ground, stand up tall, breathe fully, and really appreciate sort of what can come up as we wash the dishes, as we take care of our kids, as we ride our stationary bike, whatever it might be. So I think that's maybe a long-winded way of coming back to my understanding of innovation. I always think of, necessity is the mother of invention. And the pandemic in some ways has been an opportunity, has created the necessity for us to be inventive with limited means, because we cannot go out, we cannot interact with people. But boy, people have been really creative. They've learned how to bake their own sourdough bread, grow their own food, interact with people, and have social connection without touching one another and without being within 6 feet of one another. These are all things that we can sort of lean into really fully and use as ways to find more balance, to find more meaning in our lives. And really just start with, what are you doing with this?
If I can just follow up on that, Cristina, you mentioned at the beginning that you're taking a different approach to maybe end up at the same place. And that completely resonates to me. to me, one way that I think about meaning in my own life, and that I work with people in therapy and psychology, is what we talked about a little bit before: the recognition that your body is a miracle. It's miraculous. It's constructed of trillions of cells interacting in billions of ways to produce your experience. And in what a lot of what I heard Cristina just talk about was being aware of that experience as a miracle, no matter what you're doing. So one aspect of meaning can be just recognizing yourself as a miracle within the miracle of life and living that way. So I just want to hit on that because I feel like they do dovetail it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and so, Cristina, you talked about people being creative. In the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., whose leadership we celebrated this week, one of my favorite quotes is that almost always the creative, dedicated minority has made the world better. So perhaps in our own ways, we're making the world better day by day. So we have one more question that I'll turn it over to Kyla. And in the interest of time, because we'd like to make sure that we have some questions come from the audience, if Cristina and Sean, it's a very practical question. So if you can maybe provide just a brief commentary on that, and then we'll go over to audience Q&A if that works. Okay, so Kyla, let me hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Rika, and thank you to both Sean and Cristina for your comments. A lot of it is, making me think just about my own experiences during COVID, and I have a lot to think about. I think I'll continue to think about it long after this webinar. But sometimes it can feel a little bit daunting to take those steps to make that foundational change. So can you share with us some subtle or small approaches or practices that you found yielded significant impact or outcomes for those struggling with the stresses and well-being challenges from COVID-19?
You want to start with that one, Cristina?
Sure, thanks. I think there are a couple of obvious methods or practices that have come up like already on this call, for example, meditation. But just what Sean was saying about, the human body being made up of all of these cells and being this miracle really did make me think also about the process of evolution that got us to this point and who those ancestors had to be in that millions-year process to get us here. And something that people overlook a lot of the time is that they were survivors. They were fighters. They had to face really incomprehensible odds a lot of the time to get to the point where they could have the children who would still be our ancestors and who, led to us being here. And if I had to think about maybe what's the most fundamental practical shift that people can make right now in dealing with COVID and in fostering our own well-being, is this sense of no matter what's happening in your life, no matter if it's a habit of yourself that you're trying to change or a challenge that's in front of you, can you find a way to really face it sort of belly button forward with this sense of a fight? And not aggressive, I'm going to fight with you, but, I'm going to set myself and just attack this problem. I'm going to go for it from every angle and a little my life depends on it. Because it's one thing to say, I would really like to feel more calm. My life's pretty good, but I would just like to be less stressed out. I think more and more of us are feeling this sense of, I think more and more of us have had the experience in the past year of actually saying, whether it's on a small scale or a big scale, I don't know if I can do this another day. I don't know how I'm going to push through this. And that takes a certain fight in ourselves, a fighting spirit that we have to, really be willing to push ourselves to overcome. Once you have that mindset, then things like, okay, I'm going to meditate every day. Then it becomes less, oh, I'm going to have a practice that's just every day. And it's this thing that I do because it's good for me, like brushing my teeth. It's I need to do this every day. My family needs me to do this. I need me to do it. My community, my country needs me to do this. I'm going to sit and I'm going to meditate, or whatever it might be. I'm going to run every day to make my body strong, to make my lungs strong, whatever it might be. But I think that's the first step, that if I had to choose just like one piece of advice for people, would be that.
Nice. Yeah. So, taking off on that, to me, back to meditation and meditation strategies, the things that I do when stress begins to escalate are really the basics. To me, that means just the word that works for me is listening. So just listening to life, listening to others. You can take a long, deep breath. Let's do it together. Take a long, deep breath, allowing your shoulders to fall towards the ground, your arms to fall towards the ground, and just intentionally place 100% of your attention on the intention of listening to life going on, just for 5 seconds. There's something that changes physiologically inside, at least in me, when I do that. And it's a recognition that you're not separate from life, you're connected to life. So it's a beautiful way to release the stress, because as we talked about before, stress is related to thoughts, sped up thoughts usually. And so if you get outside yourself and put all 100% of your attention outside of your body, whether it's listening with your eyes or your ears or feeling your body, I think of all of those as listening. This is a change tool, and it's a stress reduction tool. So that if I had to pick one, I would pick that one. And if I had to pick two, I always suggest to people that if you can listen for the first thought that you have of the day, or the first sequence of thoughts when you wake up in the morning, usually before you even open your eyes. So this is a little bit the opposite of going out. This is going in and listening to your inner dialogue occurring. But if you can do that and you do it consistently for a few days, you're going to notice, does this thought annoy me, or am I excited to get up? And it will change just based on you observing. So I won't go on for too long, but those are the two you could quickly apply in your life.
Thank you so much. That's so helpful. I'm going to do that tomorrow, first thing when I wake up, if I remember.
Mm-hmm.
And on meditation, it just occurred to me that maybe there's 4 legs to your stool, actually, Sean, because I came across a quote a while ago that says that meditation is the ultimate mobile device. You can use it anywhere, anytime, unobtrusively. So, just to throw that in there, right, as we talk about the relationship of technology.
The 4-legged stool is a chair, I think.
The 4-legged stool is a chair that we can do zazen on. So we come full circle. Okay. Thank you so much, Cristina and Sean. I'd love to have the audience have the opportunity to engage with you in a conversation as well. So if any of you have any questions or want to have a conversation, to listen, to have a very engaged dialogue around this, because you've been worried, you've been thinking, you want to talk to the experts from different spectrums, please type your questions into the chat, and happy to have you be part of this. So I see here Michael Okabayashi is asking a question. Michael, do you want to ask a question, or if I don't hear from you, I'll go ahead and ask? Oh, you came off mute. Great.
Oh,
go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I'm sort of just hiding back here, but yeah, excellent information, and really looking forward to hearing about this. But I have on my heart the whole mental health crisis with respect to the college and the Gen Zs and millennials, because that's been skyrocketing. But specific to the Asian and people of color, there's a cultural stigma, and they tend to not talk about it because family issues and different areas. And I was wondering if, are we making progress in the US and Japan in developing therapies or communications in that area, and how big is the gap? And so I know in the US, we tend to take the whole mind, body, spirit area, but then compartmentalize and commercialize certain areas. And so I'm just wondering, how are we progressing? And so I'll just make it sort of broad, and either of you can share some thoughts.
Cristina, I have a thought that comes to mind if you want me to start on that one.
Please do.
So because I don't know that the actual specific answer, I don't have that kind of specialized knowledge about for Japanese people in the stigma, but I have found sort of universally in my work that when you frame a technology or a tool or a therapy as something that is designed to help with a problem, then you get a lot fewer people who are willing to engage with it than if you frame it as like what we do with our One Perfect Meditation app. This is a tool for wellness. This is a tool for performance. So if you provide the whole spectrum of opportunity, and the reality is that even if you're struggling with an emotional issue, half your day, half your day you're looking for motivation, or you're actually having to perform at your best. And so to be able to, with technology, you can provide the whole spectrum and allow people to enter in a place that's relevant for them. And that's the best that we've figured out so far in terms of how to not trigger that feeling of stigma by raising it. So we're giving an entryway into this world of wellness without framing it in the negative or in the mental health.
Yeah, Michael, I really appreciate your question because I've also seen the statistics. I think there is particularly some disturbing facts coming out of New York with the Asian American community there, and the rates of infection and mortality and the mental health toll that was taking. In large part also because we have this myth of the model minority for Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in the United States. I do have some questions in my own mind about, how some of that data gets parsed sometimes with like pre-1968 and post-1968 migration from Asia. I do think there's a possibility that the communities, individuals, families have been in the United States longer, or having maybe a different relationship to openness to mental health resources and getting counseling and support and reaching out when they're in need. But that's purely speculative and anecdotal on my part. I do know that as an Asian American who's at the very front end of the millennial generation, I do feel a sense of responsibility to make sure that people know, like people see a face that looks like them talking about whether it's, meditation or mental health, but that's speaking to them and to their experience. It's part of why, rather than being a monk sort of living cloistered in this monastery, I have chosen to be more outspoken and make sure people know that there is a way to approach these challenges that we feel in our life. Maybe they're not cloaked in the medical sort of terminology and understanding. Maybe the spiritual is a way for people to address the same issues with equally positive outcomes without the stigma, or one certainly that might feel more culturally relevant and connected to where we come from and who we are. These are the things that I think about as I, choose to sort of be outspoken and encourage particularly other young Asian Americans to be really forceful in talking about their own experience and the ways that they've overcome their own traumas and their own obstacles in life.
Yeah. So we actually have a couple more questions here. Thank you so much for that. By the way, just before I get to the questions, I think it's also important for people to understand, as you said, what people who are dealing with stress look like. It's not the mentally disturbed patient, right? It's all walks of life now, from senior leaders, executives, to the homemaker, right? And everything in between, and community leader. So I think that's really important for people to know. We have a question from Makiko Hirata-san. Makiko, if you'd like to ask a question, please feel free to come off mute. And you are coming off mute. So I'll let you ask the question rather than reading it. Dozo.
Okay, thank you. No, this has been really great, and thank you so much for all of you for putting this together. So I'm a musician, and I work with functional MRI researchers to quantify the benefit of music, and I promote music as a healing agent. And I'd love to know what the two of you think of sound environment, and particularly music, in relation to mental health.
When I teach people to do Zazen seated meditation, the sound environment's a really important part of it. Really tell people, first of all, we have people meditate with their eyes open. And then one of the really hard part about how we sit Zazen is that you're not allowed to move. And you could consider this a part of the sound environment. If you do move, you get yelled at. So the thing is, you got your eyes open, but you're seeing everything. You're also hearing everything. You're feeling everything. So there's no like shutting off, trying to, just find your little slice of peace where you cut everything else off. You really should be immersed and totally alert to everything happening around you. And listening to music in that way is so powerful when you really, that's like, you could almost like with every hair on your body, you can feel the peace in the music progressing. Like that's the most wonderful way to experience a piece of music, when you can apply your whole body awareness to it. So I think it's a wonderful mode, and it sounds like you're doing really amazing work. And I love that idea of using it to help people heal. It's a very effective means of getting people into a different state.
Yeah, I would echo that. I would love to get in touch with you after this. I mentioned that the work that we do is aimed around enabling someone to shift from where they are right now to where they want to be. And we give all sorts of options to do that. And sometimes it includes music and sometimes it doesn't. But what the data has shown me so far is that people like to have music involved. Now, I'm sure you would tell us, more with more authority than I could about the different kinds of music and how the different kinds might have different impacts on people. But for me, this goes back to there's such variability within the human being that some people it doesn't resonate, and some people it only resonates. They only want to hear music as part of the meditation that puts them to sleep. They don't want to hear voice. And so I'm actually really curious to hear what you've learned about that also.
Thank you so much.
I think you have. No, I think you're going to have a bunch of people reaching out to you now, and maybe you can collaborate, right, with Cristina and Sean on their practices. Okay, so I am going to ask one more question here around recommendations on how you help children and teenagers, homeschooling environment, whatnot. How do you help them deal with stress? And Cristina, maybe you can share the story of the high schooler that came to you. Actually, that's an amazing story.
Yeah, we do have this junior in high school who's been coming up and training pretty seriously, actually, at Shozen-ji, which means she's coming to sit Zazen 45 minutes, sometimes an hour and a half with a small break in between. So 2 45-minute sittings back to back, not moving. Her foot totally falls asleep. She kind of limps out of the dojo afterwards, but she keeps coming back. And she came because she had an incredible self-awareness about the toll that the COVID pandemic was taking on her. Just understanding that, the things that I used to do, which I've since learned mean like making TikTok videos with her friends, they don't make her happy in the same way that they used to. And she was really feeling the sense of, I think that I'm going to have to step up in my life at some point. The COVID pandemic was showing her that, but she didn't know how to get there and how to do it. So she wanted to prepare herself and felt that Zen training might be a way there. She's a very special case where we've thrown her in with the adults and she's really excelled. But for children and teenagers who maybe aren't in that place, the advice is not so dissimilar actually to what we give adults, which is to really just start with your body. You have to make sure that you are, one, getting the blood moving, but sometimes there's a point of getting your energy out to a point of like physical exertion or even exhaustion that'll actually get you to the point where you can think clearly. One of the things that we have people do when they're living in and training really seriously here, what we have them do is we have them move really heavy rocks. And it's only because you cannot think your way through how to move a heavy rock. You just have to do it. And you do it in your body. And there's no way that if it's that big and that challenging that you can think about anything else. So similarly with kids, they have a lot of energy, and giving them a chance to really work it out, be active, be outside, have their senses stimulated. It's quite important. And then it can actually create access to the ability to process their emotions and how they're feeling and be in relationship and conversation more effectively.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sean?
Right. That was so thorough and perfect to me. I think the only thing I would add to it is to say that think about instead of addressing the problem for the children, address how you are responding to the children as the mechanism that's going to have a lot of impact on how the children are coping with the experience. So, and I don't know where this question came from, but a lot of times that question will come from a frustration with the experience of having to cope with the children, which is 1,000% understandable in this new environment. But it might be that the most powerful thing you can do is be aware of yourself and your own reactions and your own judgments to how the children are behaving, because that's what gets picked up on and produces behavior and experience within the children. But other than that, what Cristina talked about, I think is perfect.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Reverend Moon and Dr. Sullivan, for your extraordinary insights and all the great work that you're doing that's touching the lives of so many people and the families and the communities and the businesses around them. And you'll stay for the breakout, so I'm sure we'll have the chance to talk with you more one-on-one. I'd like to now actually invite Suzanne Basala, who is the president of USJC, to come in and say a few words before I hand it over to Jackie, my co-chair, to wrap things up. Suzanne?
Thank you so much, Rika. Really provocative and, as you said, profound in a lot of ways. So just a couple of things, you talked at the top of the discussion, Rika, about one of the purposes of this was to think about as leaders, how do we bring wellness, mental health, and caring for people as leaders. And so that's what I was really, like the lens I was really listening. And it reminded me the first time I really had to deal with a crisis was 9/11. I was in the Pentagon, I was still in the military. And I remember that after 9/11, not all of our workforce was obviously comfortable coming back to the Pentagon. And they had training, and I was sent to this training, and it was called, how to care for your employees' stress, managing your employees' stress. And so I went to this class, and I remember being kind of offended because it was really actually about managing our own stress. And I felt tricked, kind of like, I thought this was supposed to be about how to be a good manager. And here they are telling me how to handle my stress. And I didn't have the awareness about how you can't take care of people until you care for yourself. And then I remember 3/11 and the earthquake, tsunami, the USAID sent the embassy an expert in dealing with these kind of disasters. And the very first thing that they told Ambassador Roos was, you have to take care of yourself. If you're not taking care of yourself, then you cannot take care of this problem. You can't take care of other people. So I love that, of course, fast forward 10 more years, and we're having this webinar and having a really open conversation. So I really want to thank our speakers, Reverend Moon and Dr. Sullivan. But I also really want to thank all the people who organized this and asked the questions, and for giving us this opportunity. What I feel like I experienced so far, and we have more, is first starting with a sense of community and belonging, so that we can all acknowledge what we need to learn for ourselves and for our organizations. But then we got so much practical and inspiring advice from our speakers that I found highly empowering. And so what I'm hoping for people is they'll feel that this is part of a family, a community that they've joined, and we can support each other as we learn from the conversation and apply this in our own lives and have some of the same vocabulary and starting point. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens in the breakout sessions. And so I'm going to turn it back over to you, Rika. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you so much. Wonderful, wonderful words and a wonderful way to close this out. So Jackie, if I can just hand it to you to just kind of share with us what's coming up, what's happening next with the breakout sessions. And Jackie Sanasaki is co-chair with me for Northern California region at USJC. Jackie?
Thank you, Rika. Wow, that was much more than I bargained for, and we've been working on this for months. I think, it just goes to show, like, closing your eyes and breathing deeply for 5 seconds can make such a big difference in your day. It did for mine, and I think I really will think seriously about trying to incorporate other methods to help my physical and mental health going forward. But before we split into breakout rooms, I'd like to extend a very special offer from Dr. Sean Sullivan. He has offered to give the One Perfect meditation app for free to attendees to use for the remainder of 2021. So if you're interested, please send an email to Sean, SEAN, at oneperfect.com to get your free access link. And we'll put that in the chat, if someone could put that in the chat for us. So people can email Sean if they're interested. And also, if you enjoyed today's program, please mark your calendar for our next regional event taking place on March 26th. NorCal will be doing a joint event with Hawaii to discuss the evolving concept of remote work. So we'll be featuring Rob Nobriga, a founding member of the Movers and Shakas program, Sherry Manor Namara, president of the Chamber of Commerce of Hawaii, and Richard Matsui, a successful Bay Area entrepreneur who is currently working remotely from his home state of Hawaii. So we're excited for that upcoming event, so please join us for that. And now, let's get into breakout rooms. Each room will have a moderator to help kick off discussions. And also Cristina and Sean will be joining some of the rooms so you can ask them more questions there too. Please join us even if you can't stay the entire time. We'd love to chat more. And thank you all again for participating in today's event.